And let's see. After meeting. All right, I think we are live. So my name is Mike. I'm at the Blue Island Public Library right now. I'm downstairs. I'm in the Tech Annex, as you can see behind me. Today's class is audio recording basics, and this might get a little weird just because of the way Zoom handles audio. Hopefully everything will work. So I'm going to just go over our setup here in the Tech Annex downstairs, and I'm going to also show basic recording with GarageBand and Pro Tools, depending on how that works with Zoom. Hopefully everything will work. So first, let me grab the camera here. And so if anybody's never been to the recording studio before, it's downstairs. It looks like this. We have a bunch of equipment here. We have a microphone, it's a Bluebird, and we have an audio interface that we usually use. Works out pretty good. And a couple of monitors and some equipment and some instruments, some guitars, and there's also a bunch more equipment outside the doors here, which I can't really show you because the camera doesn't reach that far. There's actually 4 guys playing together right now. They sound really good. Okay, so our setup basically is we have a Mac Mini. We also have Windows computers that are available, but we have a Mac Mini in the recording studio, and to it we have attached this Behringer USB audio interface, which works out pretty good for us. It's just a USB audio device, which you can get those anywhere. We chose this particular model because it has 4 inputs on it. You can get a similar model with 2. You can get large rack mounted systems with like 10, 12, 15 inputs on them. So that's our setup. Basically, equipment gets plugged into there and then it's USB connected to the computer. So what I'm going to do now is share my screen and we'll show some basic recording. Hopefully this will all work. So I'm going to do that now. Share sound, desktop 1. Okay, so hopefully my desktop is being streamed to the world. So here's our Mac. It's wonderful. I'm going to start GarageBand and we'll see how that goes. Okay, so this is something I was messing around with just a little bit ago, but I am going to close this and pretend I am starting from a new because that's much more interesting. So here is Pro Tools, sorry, GarageBand, and this is like the opening screen, and we're just going to create an empty project. So I'm going to click on that, and the first thing it does, it's going to ask which input we're using. Again, I should be in the picture-in-picture at this point. Our Behringer box that we're using here has 4 inputs on it. Thus, we have 4 different choices here. Actually, you can do stereo on the bottom, but we'll worry about how that works later. So I'm going to pick number 4 for right now. I have let's see, we have the microphone that I'm speaking to you in is plugged in number 1, and then I have a guitar next to me that's plugged into number 4. So I'm going to pick number 4. And it is a guitar, so I'm going to pick the guitar. All right, let's choose a record. That's great. And I hear sound from the Behringer box. Okay, so I click create, and now we are in GarageBand. And if I take this instrument that I have here, lives in the Tech Annex down here, I'm going to display something. You'll see we immediately have a volume meter, so we can see that we're getting something. So we can record because we're getting audio, which is great. Now, a lot of times, if you don't get that, don't go any farther because that'll be a problem for you. If you have some similar setup at home, you'll want to be able to see something moving around when you play the instrument or sing or whatever you're doing in GarageBand. And simply, a lot of times you might have to just change this input here. So a lot of times you might make another track and it might default to a certain number and you might actually be plugged into something else. This is kind of dependent on your home device. I think most people are probably recording these nowadays with an audio interface that's USB connected. And actually, I'm going to take one quick timeout, make sure nobody is here. No, okay, nobody is here. Okay. Didn't want anybody dying in the waiting room in Zoom. So we're good there. I'm going to go back to my screen. And the simple way to get going is hit the record button and kind of have a count off right away. And I can jump some things and hit the stop button. And you can see we have a nice little waveform. So we've recorded something. Now, this is where it's going to get a little weird because of the way I'm trying to do this. So normally, input and output are set for your recording device. Now, I'm trying to do this through Zoom at the same time, so I don't know if this will actually play back, and if it doesn't, then I have to change something. Okay, so I can hear it, but I don't know. There's nobody else here, so I'm going to take a guess and say you probably can't hear that. So I'm going to actually change that. I go to GarageBand and go to Preferences. And for audio, I'm going to change the output device to the built-in Zoom audio device, which changes both of them. And at least when I tested this earlier, that allowed me to get the recording to actually play through into the... Okay. So you should have heard 5 seconds of me just banging away on some strings on the guitar. And you also hear a metronome in the background, which we don't really need at this point in time. That's the this icon right here, the one that looks like a metronome. So that's the click track. We don't really need that just yet. I'm going to turn that off. Now, there's a timeline here. This is kind of like if I want to play a certain section of something I've recorded. It's kind of self-explanatory there. Hit it one more time to make sure we're getting something. Okay, great. So that's working. I'm going to delete that because that's just kind of nothing. If I turn the metronome back on, I'll try to play just a couple chords on the guitar here. I will attempt to play it somewhat to the metronome here, just so we can have something we can start with. Okay, so this should be interesting. All right, so in order for me to record, I need to change my input back. So this will be interesting. All right, so in this case, this is UMC 404 HD 192K. That's just the model name for that Behringer box, that input device that I was showing earlier. So I'm going to change that back, and I should be able to record now. Hit the record button, and oops, undo. Put this back to the beginning, rewind to the beginning, hit record. Okay. All right, so good. We have recording. All right, so let me do what I said I was going to do and try to record something. It's actually a little noisy in here, but I think I can hear the click. So okay. So I just played a couple chords in C, and I could have done this example with anything. We could have played the piano, or I could have attempted to sing, but I didn't want anybody's eardrums to explode. So let me play this back, which may or may not make it across Zoom. Okay, so I played 2 chords. I'm going to do something, and then I'll change the input. So if I wanted to take something, and let's say that was like the kind of rhythm track for my piece of music that I'm working on, one thing I could do is take that and loop that. So I'm going to take this, and this icon kind of clips away or shortens the recording. I can also do right where this marker is. I can right click, right click and say split at playhead. I can delete the end of it. So in other words, what I'm doing here is I want to take this piece, these two chords, and I just want to loop them so I have something to play over. So just click on it, copy, go over here, paste, kind of put it in the right spot. Since I played to the tempo, these bars are going to match up. It makes it easy to work with. Yeah, you don't have to do that. You might just play, you can do, there's plenty of people that make really nice music and they just play like 3 minutes of drums and then they come back and they play 3 minutes of guitar and then they go back and they play 3 minutes of piano and then they go back and they sing over it. And it's just, nothing is to tempo, but that's fine. As long as everything is being played together, it'll sound right. So for me, for our purposes, I'm just going to loop this. So I just copy and pasted something. I'm going to hear it and just make sure it sounds like it kind of goes together. All right, that's good enough. So I'm going to paste this a couple more times, and then I'm going to do our input change thing. All right, so I just pasted that a bunch of times. Incidentally, also this icon right here is kind of how you change the size of the view of your project. So just kind of zoom in and zoom out. If I go back here, I'm going to do preferences, and I'm going to change that back to zoom device. And we'll see what I have here. So I'm playing a chord, and then I'm playing another chord. And then I'm just going back to the same chord. Now, there's kind of an ugly click in between. Yeah, because I wasn't really spot on the tempo. Should have been listening to the metronome a little bit better, but it's okay. We could hide that later with some actual drums or something like that. But that could be the basis for our song. There's our rhythm track. So now, for a piece of music, then we could try to sing over it, or we could try to add more instruments on it, different instruments, just the lead guitar or something. So incidentally, well, let's do like a lead part for it first. So if I want to add a piece to it, I just need to add another track. So I'm just going to right click down here. I'm going to say new audio track, and it made something for me, gave it a kind of a generic icon. This can be changed to, let's say I'm going to do like something like some kind of lead guitar. So I'll just pick something that looks like a guitar. And you'll notice down here, so when I click on this first track, we have input number 4 down here. This one, the new one, made it input number 1. That's a problem because my instrument is actually plugged into number 4. So that's kind of a common problem that I see a lot of people do. And of course, we're also trying to do this live over Zoom and Facebook. So my number 4 is actually grayed out because we're not using it. So I have to kind of change this back really quick. Normally you won't have to do this. It's just because I'm trying to do Zoom and Facebook Live at the same time. So now I can change it to number 4. In other words, if I left it at number 1 and I start playing the guitar, we don't see any level here. That's a problem. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to change it to, whoops, where did it go? Recording settings. Okay, somehow that got collapsed. So I'm going to change this to number 4. Actually, no, number 1 is actually, like I said, the microphone. So that's me talking. That's the level we see. I change this to number 4. Now I should get the guitar again. Which we do. So great. So now I can go back and really whichever track is active, at least in GarageBand, the default, whichever one is active is what we're going to record to. So if I had this first one active and I hit the record button, what I actually do is start re-recording over the first part that I did. I don't want to do that. I just hit the stop button. I can do edit undo. Piece of cake, right? So I want this one to be active, and I'm going to rewind it and go back to the beginning and record And I'm just going to put like a couple notes or something. Hopefully something will make sense. I don't claim to be the best musician in the world. Let's see what happens. Okay. So I just recorded a couple notes. You can see that they're kind of small. It's kind of another thing. Also, I'm just going to stop the share for a second so I can show you the settings that I'm using here. So on these, like I said, I'm plugged into number 4. So this one right here, this is actually probably backwards too. It's actually a quarter of the way up, even though it might look like it's 3/4 of the way up. Camera's inversed here. So I have that set low. I feel like you can always raise it later. Some people like to record, they like to have really large waveforms, and that's fine, but eventually you get to the point where it gets clipped out and then the signal gets distorted and it gets crunchy and distorted sounding. So I always record really quiet because I know I can always turn it up later. Can't always turn it down later. So let me go back to my share. And we also have a volume control on each one of these. So here's volume, here's volume. So I can turn this up. Also, if I want to put effects on this, I can do that as well. We do our input track for Zoom so we can hear that. And let's see what happened. So I've got my okay. So great. So that's some lead part, and I just turned it up a little bit because it was kind of quiet. I could have also turned this down. Kind of gets crazy if you're like having some big project where you're having like 12 tracks or something, and then everything gets louder and louder and louder. There's also like kind of an invisible master track that's in here that would show you how loud everything is all put together. In fact, actually, if you want to see that, it's under view. Track, oh, show master track. Here we go. It's a track, show master track. This is actually in here, and this is kind of like the sum of all the instruments together. So everything pulled together. You don't want to max that out. That'll be a problem later. So again, another kind of reason to record everything quiet. For us, we don't really need to know too much about this. That's kind of more of like a mastering thing that we'll cover if there's time. So I'm just going to hide that again. Now, so we have our 2 tracks. Wonderful. I just ended it right here. So I'm going to just even delete these other 2 and just say it's a 10-second song. Great. Now, we can also put effects on this since it's kind of a lead part. Like this is kind of, it was just, obviously it emulated an amplifier for us, but gave us just a clean tone, which is perfectly fine. I have an electric guitar here, but we went for a clean tone, so it's fine. This other one doesn't have anything on it. Since I did kind of play somewhat of a lead part, we might want to add something to that. So when you go down here, you're going to have plugins. So this is kind of collapsed right now. If I click this, scroll down, see it's actually already got a compressor and some kind of EQ on it. These empty spots are where you can add stuff. So I click on this and I can do, let's see. Oh goodness. Okay, so all this. So amps, pedal boards, straight up distortion. So let's pick maybe an amp and we'll see what happens. So I picked Amp Designer, and you can see that it kind of shows me a visual representation of the particular amplifier that is being emulated by GarageBand. And we can play with the knobs and it will change the sound. So let's say I go back here. Maybe I'll just mute this other track and I'll play what we have for our lead part, which is fine. So you can see I mess around with the knobs and different things change. Make sure okay, so we're on our Zoom audio device. Hopefully that's being broadcast actually coming through over Zoom and Facebook. So back to our amp modifier, we can play with all the knobs to our heart's content, pick different amps. There's a bunch of presets too. So where it says factory default, I'm just clicking on that and let's just say, geez, I don't know, distorted, modern lead. How about that? That sounds great. Now this is probably going to be loud, so I'm going to turn that down and let's see what that sounds like. Get to the right spot, skip ahead. I'm just clicking on the track. Okay. All right, so great. So let's see what that sounds like together. And okay, so great. So there's something. That'll be good enough. All right, so let's say, you know, we then wanted to add, I happen to have a piano here. Able to do piano and vocals. Really don't want to sing. I don't want to scare anyone. So let's say I'm going to do another audio track. Needs more parts to it. So new audio track. And let's say I want to get our default icons, and I click this and change this to something else. I'll just show you what vocals would look like. So actually, look at this. We already have one icon. That's great. That's just for us to help differentiate between everything. Again, this needs to be set. Oh, shoot. I like to do our quick changeover so I can hear what's going on. It might not matter. This might actually still work. So this is on number 1, which this isn't actually correct, but it might work. So let's see if I turn this on. Check, check, check. Okay, so it's not gonna work. So I just have to change something. Normally you wouldn't have to do this, but I have to change something to go back and change this to number 1. Check, check, check. Check, check, check. There we go. Okay, so my voice is coming through, and that's how I'm getting the volume meter here. Hopefully you guys are able to still hear me. Should I had somebody here? Okay. All right, so I'm just going to say a couple words and let's just see what happens. So record. Check 1. Check 1, 2. Hello? Perfect. Okay, so it's got a couple seconds of my voice, and I'm gonna switch this back over so we can hear what that sounds like. It's just gonna be me saying check 1, 2. So let's go back here. Check 1, check 1, 2. Hello. A great intro. That could really be something. So great. So that's how we could do a vocal. I just happen to have this microphone right next to me, so that's great. And maybe since there's a piano in front of me as well, so this is already plugged in, just on a different number on our Behringer box. It's on number 2. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before, which is basically just right-click, make a new audio track. And I'm going to give it a different icon as long as I'm here. Keyboard. About this thing right here. So this needs to be changed to, figure a better way to do this. This needs to be on number 2. That's all. So number 2, and turn the piano on. Our piano is coming through, and I'm just going to do one more quick record, and that'll be enough tracks, and then we'll do other things, more interesting things. It's not like this 1, 2, 3, 4. That's just the count off to before you hit the record button. It counts 1, 2, 3, 4 before it starts to help you kind of start at the right time. And the metronome, obviously, we talked about is the metronome, which kind of using our first rhythm track as metronome anyway, so it doesn't really matter. This is also this button here is lets you hear it while you're, this is called, usually there's a tooltip here, input monitoring. So that's just, you want to be able to hear it at the same time. You usually want that on. So I'm gonna try to add a track and just see what happens. I'll just add a couple of notes. Okay, cool. So we added a piano piece, and let's just see. I'm going to change this back so we can all hear it together. And let's see, maybe I'll just solo this first. I'll just mute some of these other guys so we can hear what the piano sounds like. Okay, great. So I don't know what I was doing. It was just hitting random notes. I don't know. The good thing about music is if you stay in key, it sort of always sounds like something if you don't know what you're doing. So that's kind of my that's my secret to everything. Stay in key and follow the rules. And even if you don't know what you're doing, like myself, then it still sort of sounds like music. All right. Now we could go back and we could add effects and things like that, just like we did on the guitar. I kind of like just how the clean piano sounds. So let's see what that sounds like all together, and we'll try to level it.
Check 1, 2. Hello?
Okay, cool. So that could be our song right there. Normally, we would probably have something that's longer than about 10 seconds soon. We would probably have something that sounds better, and we would probably have a lot more tracks, depending on how crazy you wanted to get with our music song. So now that this is kind of done, we'll say, while we're listening to it, kind of play with the levels. Let's go ahead and save our project. So I'm just going to do file save, and I'll put it on the desktop here. Call this Mike GarageBand. Must have garbage. That would probably be more accurate, wouldn't it? GarageBand class song. Cool. I'm going to click save, and what that does is, since I saved it on the desktop, where did it go? I thought I did. Might be on the other screen, desktop. Yeah, where did you go? Oh, wait. Oh, here we go. Okay, so here we go. So here it is, and it's great. And it's not really rendered out yet. In other words, that's the entire project. That's kind of like this whole layout on the screen that you're seeing along with me. If we wanted to get like a wave or an MP3 out of this, hold on a second. Hello. Sort of. I'll catch you in a few minutes. I'm on Facebook Live, so. Okay. All right. So this is, yeah, so it's, if we wanted to get like an actual file that we could share with somebody, like an MP3 file or a WAV file or something, we need to do another thing, which is under the share menu right here. And it's export song to disk. So I click on that, and I get another prompt. And you can see we have our 4 options here. You see MP3, AF, and WAV. So I'm gonna do a WAV. WAV is nice. It's uncompressed. It'll sound good. If you're trying to share it with someone or email it to someone, you probably want to do MP3 because normally the WAV file is going to be like 20 megs and the MP3 is going to be like 2 megabytes. So you actually be able to email it. But for right now, I'm going to do a WAV and I'm just going to click. Actually, I'll just do an MP3. I probably won't even hear the difference anyway. I click the export button and it's going to run through, and bounce is the terminology that's used a lot to render that out. And you can see, here we go. Here's our file, our MP3 file. Now we can take this and share it, put it on Facebook, social media, Bandcamp, SoundCloud, whatever. If I double click on this, there's a lot going on in the extra. Normally it plays. There we go.
Check one. Check 1, 2.
Oh yeah.
Hello?
Okay. All right. Okay. So great. So that's it. So that is the basic version of just going in and recording something with GarageBand. We also have Pro Tools, which we'll get into in just a minute. I think it's only like 6:30. I think most people probably just come and use GarageBand just because it's a lot simpler. Pro Tools I feel like can do a lot more, but most of the time you don't even need it. So it is what it is. Now we could still do other stuff with mastering and be adding like fades here and there and doing all kinds of things. That I think is good for our GarageBand demo, so to speak. It's one other thing I wanted to show, which was multi-track recording. Here, we just did one track at a time. In other words, we did something with the guitar, then we did something with the piano, then we did something with the microphone. Let's say you had a friend with you and you guys wanted to record together. Now, in the olden days, you would have a microphone between the two of you, and it was kind of like you recorded it on one track and everything was mixed together. So you couldn't silence one person or something like that. Now, what you can do is multi-track recording. So you can have somebody on one track and another person on another track. And if like you really didn't like what someone did, or if they just didn't do something right, or they made a mistake, then you can take that out. In other words, here we have 4 tracks, right? We recorded them one at a time, but just like we're saying, like if I didn't like this guitar part or something, I would just take it and just delete it. I would just hit the delete key and it'd be gone. And I'd be like, all right, well, let's do another lead track or do a different instrument or something. Maybe not even have a lead guitar. Could do all kinds of things. So that's kind of the beauty of the multi-track recording. So in Pro Tools, in GarageBand, there's something needs to be enabled, which is under, I wanted to show this. Configure track header. So I just right-clicked on something and I can say configure track header. This record enable button needs to be on and enabled. And all that does is add a record button on all the tracks. So remember before, we sort of said that, whichever one is highlighted is the one you're recording with. You notice when I click on the different ones, the red button also moves with it. Now let's say, we wanted to record vocals and guitar at the same time. There are 2 different things. The guitar is plugged into number 4 in our environment here, and the microphone is plugged into number 1. So I would have to then say, okay, we're going to be using number 4 on this one, and we're going to be using number 1 on this one. And I would have to record enable both of them. Then when we go over here and record, because of the Zoom thing, you can't see it, but I actually can. It's not actually recording, but then we would get 2 different instruments or 2 different people doing things on 2 different tracks, and that's very, very helpful to be able to change things when they're separated out in that manner. So that is probably about it for GarageBand, and now I think we are going to move into oh, you know what? There was one more thing I wanted to show in GarageBand. Let's go back to GarageBand. I'll share my screen again. And actually, a couple things in here. Okay, so controls, EQ. We could probably do like a whole class on just EQ and how that kind of affects different instruments and things. The plugins we'll do another time. There is a little tuning fork button, which is helpful for anybody who's playing like a stringed instrument or something that needs to be tuned. It's not picking it up right now, but that's okay. What I really wanted to show was this button right here, the loop browser. So there is a whole bunch of kind of pre-made loops that we can use. And I'm just going to click on one. Okay, cool. So we can pick any of these and add it to our project. Now, let's see, let's look for, all right, I need to stop for a sec. So let's say I'm a, aspiring musician and I want to make a new song and I really want drums in it, but maybe I don't know how to play drums or I don't feel confident about my drum playing or something like that, or any other instrument. Kind of take all these free to use samples that GarageBand comes with and add it to our project. So let's say I wanted drums in here. So I'm gonna pick instrument, all drums, and let's just see what's in here. Oh yeah, okay. All right, so let's say I wanted that one. I mean, there's hundreds of them in here. But let's say I wanted, shoot, I don't know which one I was on. Let's say if there's just like a generic like pop drums or something we can use. Is there maybe rock drums or something? Let's see. Okay, oh, genre, here we go. All right, so rock, blues, drums, there should be something in here. All right, cool. So let's just say I wanted that one. Let's say I really like that drum beat. All I gotta do is take that and drag it into the project. There it is, now it's in our project. So if we kind of take this marker again, oops, that's the overall volume. This marker, the one that zooms in, I can now take this and I can move it around in our project. And the good thing is, again, since I tried to play to the tempo, it should match up. I don't actually know if this is gonna work around it, but hopefully it does. So I'm gonna copy and paste this a bunch of times. Oops, I end up over here. All right. So I'll copy and paste this guy a bunch of times, and I'm just gonna skip ahead with Command V for paste. And get a couple of these. Okay, yeah, we'll do the whole thing. We'll see. Let's just, I don't know if this is actually gonna work. Might not, it'll be embarrassing, but that's okay. We could have started with the drums and played along with the drums and it would at least make sense. So let's see.
Check 1. Check 1, 2.
Okay, hello. Cool. Okay, so there's our wonderful, thanks to whoever that drummer is that recorded that for us. We can use it in our project. So, that's another way to get inspiration. You can do that with, not just drums, but, there's little piano riffs and little guitar riffs and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, maybe if I didn't like my guitar playing, I could just replace everything with, loops and everything, and it would probably sound a lot better than what I just made. Okay, I got all these. Okay, so that's the point. There is that there's a whole bunch of loops that kind of come stock with GarageBand that can be used, and you can either use them as a start and then build instruments around them, or you can do all kinds of them. Sky's the limit. Let's just say that. All right, so now what I'm going to do is say that's enough for GarageBand. We're going to look at Pro Tools for the last couple of minutes. Actually, a little bit more familiar with Pro Tools than I'm with GarageBand. but I do see the advantage of having a much simpler thing to work with. And I think GarageBand does it well. So I'm going to share my screen again and share sound. And hopefully you can see my screen. I'm going to start Pro Tools, which is this icon right here, this purple thing. Oh, it's the A for Avid or what that is, but that's Pro Tools. So let's start this guy. And maybe I'll just watch a spinning beach ball thing for a while that thing is jumping up and down. But yeah, so we have Pro Tools here at the library. We've got it on a couple machines. So we have it on this recording studio machine, and we also have it on the other side of this wall on a couple Windows computers. It's not the most stable software that I've used, but you can do a lot with it, and people have done a lot with it. So here we are, Pro Tools. So this is the kind of opening screen that you're going to get with Pro Tools. You might be tempted to do something with a template. I don't think that's a good idea. Things get kind of weird when you start with a template. So I usually do create a blank session. The rest of this stuff, you know, okay, we're going to be using WAV files, 24-bit, 48K. The easiest way to explain all this is just use the default. Like you could do a whole thing on, you know, trying to hear the difference between all this stuff. Just use the default settings. That usually works pretty good. So I'm going to click OK. And we should get our, and we're going to name it first. So I'm going to call this Mike Pro Tools class song. And put it on the desktop. That sounds good. Might be a flash drive or something. Normally. All right, so here is the general Pro Tools interface. There's typically two windows open. In other words, if I go up to this window button, not sure why that's not, why is it still on the Finder? Oh, let me try to reset this. Okay, there we go. There's Pro Tools. I'm gonna share this one more time with my sound. Okay, so here's Pro Tools. So there's typically, so when I go to window, what we see here is the edit window. That's kind of where most of what we're doing is happening. There's also a mixed window. So a lot of times you go places and they'll have two windows open, which is fine. Kind of just throwing that out right away because it's kind of confusing at first. And also at some point you're going to accidentally close this and you're going to be stuck and you're wondering like how to do anything. You need to go to window and then edit to get the edit window. So to get started, there's a lot here, but it's actually, it's not as crazy as it looks. So to get started, I'm just going to say track new, kind of like what we did in GarageBand. And one, okay, mono track, an audio track, samples. We'll kind of go over what all this stuff is later. Samples and ticks. Most of the time, you just want a standard audio mono track if you're working with on instruments. You almost always want mono unless you're actually doing like if you're doing vocals, it's going to be mono. If you're doing a guitar, it's going to be mono. You might do stereo if you're using a piano, but that's only like if you're actually doing something to like split stereo tracks and have it set up the right. So 99% of the time, just use mono. Unless you have a specific need to use stereo because you want something, just take my word for it. Okay, so here's our first track. We have a couple things here and we have this IO here. If you don't see this, basically it is under edit window views and it's IO that turns this on and off. I think it's helpful to have it there, which is why ours is showing up by default. So I think we purposely made it that way. And so again, we kind of have this problem that I'm trying to do this over Zoom and Facebook Live. So this is not actually how it's supposed to look. We would normally see 1, 2, 3, 4, and that is good because again, that's our particular audio device has 4 inputs on it. 1, 2, 3, 4. So these interface numbers match up to what we have. You had, again, if you had something at home that only had 2 spots on it, you would probably only see 1 and 2, and they might be called, Sapphire or something, whatever your actual model is. So if I pick 1 where the vocals would be plugged in, I'm gonna have to do, let's see, I'm gonna have to change this to show you what I did first. So this is a common problem too. If you go to setup and playback engine, just like GarageBand, how to be told, which interface we're actually using, Pro Tools has to know as well. So this needs to be whatever your actual thing is. So ours is a Behringer UMC 404. That's the actual model number of the device that we have. So it needs to be changed to that. And see, this is a problem because this has to restart the whole. So we're going to see how much we can do here in this environment. This would be better if it was, this class was in person. It would be a lot easier to just show how this works. So anyway, hopefully you can still hear me. And if I arm this track, we have our meter again, just like we did before. So number 1 was, in our case, is our microphone, and it's picking up my voice right now. Say I wanted to use my guitar. I could put on a number 4, and then I could reach over for the guitar. There is our level for the guitar. So great. And similar, rewind, fast forward, all that, record, play, just like we had in GarageBand. One thing in Pro Tools you have to remember is when you record, you have to arm the track and record. So you have to hit record twice, once on the track here, and then once up here. Now we can get going. So if I hit play some chords again. Okay, so I'm gonna hit stop, and let's see if I can do this correctly. I'm gonna save this and change this again so we can actually hear what's being played. Some audio. I think this will work. Must need a assistant to be with me on this so I know if this is actually going through. Okay, this is just, ignore this, just say no, you don't need the report. These are the kind of zoom in and zoom out buttons. They're also down here, this plus and minus. Kind of like this one better because you can kind of drag it and get exactly what you want. And so this is what we played. Will this play back? I don't know if this will. Okay, cool. So we have a guitar. That's great. Now, similarly with the effects, that's what these inserts are. So I pick an empty spot. I can use plugins, and then I can change the sound. So in the case of a guitar or something, you might want to emulate an amplifier or something, which in the Pro Tools world is, where is it? There's one called, well, you could do like a straight just distortion plugin, but there are, oh yeah, here we go. So the Sans amp is really good, and 11 and Free is another good one. I think Rectify is a good one too. I picked this bottom one, and basically that popped up on the other screen. I'm gonna drag it over. And where it says factory default, those are the presets. And in the case of a guitar, you can do all these great things and get distortion and things like that. So if I have this effect on, it should sound distorted. Yeah, okay, so great. And similarly, if this was like a voice or something like that, we can do different plugins. You might want to do some EQ or a compressor or some reverb or something like that. If this was a piano, it's actually a whole way to have the computer emulate the piano sounds for you. which should be a whole nother class. But give you an example. For example, this particular piano that happens to be right here is relatively limited in that it only has like 5 sounds. So it's 2 different kinds of pianos, an electric piano, a harpsichord, or strings. There's really not a whole lot this particular piano can do. I mean, it's still a nice piano. It's got, weighted keys and all that stuff, but it is limited in its sound bank. There's a way to get the computer to kind of take the keys that you hit and then emulate all the sounds. So instead of having 5 sounds to pick from, you can have the computer has thousands upon thousands of sounds to pick from. But that's kind of a whole nother, we're getting into MIDI and everything, and we'll do that another time. So that's great. And let me go back to my share so I can show you what I'm doing. All right, so that's that. And well, let's see. So it's 6:53. So we're actually going to wrap up in a minute here. The short of this is you kind of, you're working with the clips in the same manner that you were in GarageBand. Pro Tools kind of has this thing up here with the different tools. What should happen is you should use the one that kind of gives you all of them. And what that does is changes kind of depending where you are, where the cursor is on the actual clip. So like this kind of bracket icon is shortening and lengthening, kind of trimming the edges. This hand is actually moving it around. This eye, I guess it is just, you're just selecting things and moving around. These are fades, fade in, fade out, different things like that. So that's great. I'll show you, say you want another track, like kind of we were before, I'm kind of just rushing through this. Well, you do track new. It's like you did before, create a new mono audio track. And you'd set it to the right input that you actually needed, which doesn't look right now, but that's okay. And you do the same thing. You would arm this track. I can't show that right now without changing a bunch of stuff, but you would arm it, and then you would go up here and record, and then you would have, another track you'd be putting recording on. So now, when you save this, again, you get I put this on the desktop, Pro Tools class song. Briefly show so the Pro Tools way of kind of saving the project files is this group of files here. Your actual original clips are in this audio files directory, and the rest of this is, things that you put on it and kind of the layout. When you save the PTX, PTX is the extension that the project is. It's this thing here. That's just the layout of your project. I've seen a lot of people kind of save this, just this file, and then take it to another computer or try to work on another day, and nothing works because you didn't save the whole project. So you need, like, for example, this audio 101 is this clip right here. So if you don't also save this is just going to be grayed out if you open it later. So you just need to make sure that you're saving the entire project when you save, if you want to use it somewhere else. So that's that. And let's say I was done with it. Let's say I had a whole bunch of stuff here. I had a whole project, a whole song. We would do file and we would do bounce. This export is not what you want to do. So if you want to get like an MP3 or wave out of it, like we did in GarageBand, we want to do bounce to disk. So bounce to disk. Easiest thing to do here is, if you're not sure, leave the defaults. Say bounce, and by default, because I added this MP3 here, it's allowing me to tag the MP3, which is nice. Not important for our purposes. So I'm gonna say okay and bounce, and it bounces the track out. And then if we go back into our folder here, go into our bounce files, and then we have our MP3 and our wave, and we could then save that, send it to whoever, put it on YouTube, share it with people over SoundCloud or whatever we could do, whatever we want, become famous, what have you. I think we just have another minute or two left. You can really spend all day on Pro Tools. There's a whole nother world with you know, with MIDI and plugins and automation. And one thing really cool that Pro Tools has